You're a waitress, Maya. You have zero leverage, zero money, and zero power. Take the $10,000 and disappear, or I will bury you." Those were the last words Derek Sterling said to his wife in a crowded diner loud enough for everyone to hear. He thought he was discarding a broken woman. He thought he had hired the city's most vicious law firm to crush her. But Derek forgot one crucial detail about the woman he slept next to for 5 years. When they walked into the courtroom and Derek's high-priced attorney saw the signature on Maya's birth certificate, the blood drained from his face. He didn't just turn pale. He started trembling. Because Maya wasn't just a waitress, she was the one person in that room who owned them all. The lunch rush at the Blue Jay Diner in downtown Chicago was a symphony of chaos. The air smelled of burnt coffee bacon grease and despair. Maya Linley wiped a rag across table 4, her back aching in that dull, rhythmic way she had grown used to over the last 3 years. She was 32, but under the harsh fluorescent lights, she looked older. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, strands escaping to stick to her forehead, and her apron was stained with ketchup and mustard. To the customers, she was invisible, just a pair of hands delivering eggs and refilling coffees, and that was exactly how Maya liked it. The bell above the door jingled, but it wasn't the usual construction crew or the office clerks looking for a cheap melt. The atmosphere in the diner shifted instantly. The chatter died down. Even the cook, old Stan, stopped scraping the grill. Maya didn't turn around. She knew that cologne. Santal 33 and arrogance. "Maya!" The voice was smooth-cultured and dripping with disdain. She slowly turned to face table 4. Standing there looking like a diamond in a dumpster was Derek Sterling. He was wearing a navy bespoke suit from Savile Row, his Patek Philippe watch catching the light as he adjusted his cuffs. "Derek," she said, her voice steady. "I'm working." "I can see that," he sneered, looking around the diner as if he might catch a disease just by breathing the air. "It suits you. The grease, the mediocrity, it's authentic." He didn't sit. He simply reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He dropped it onto the sticky table with a heavy thud. "It's done," Derek said. "Divorce papers. I've been generous considering." Maya looked at the envelope, then back at his face. "Generous? $10,000, Derek said, loud enough for the couple at the next table to gasp. "And I'm letting you keep the Toyota. In exchange, you sign a full NDA. You don't talk to the press about my company, you don't talk about us, and you certainly don't mention Chloe." Chloe. The 22-year-old marketing intern, Derek, had been mentoring for the last 6 months. The one who posted Instagram stories from the passenger seat of the Porsche Maya had helped pay for back when they were struggling. "I don't want your money, Derek," Maya said quietly. "I just want what's fair. We built Sterling Tech together. I wrote the original code for the algorithm in our basement while you were out networking." Derek laughed. It was a cold, barking sound. "You wrote some script, Maya. I built the empire. And let's be real, who is the judge going to believe me, the CEO of a Fortune 500 company on the verge of an IPO, or you?" He gestured vaguely at her apron. "A waitress who barely graduated state college." He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "My lawyers are Pendergast, Stone and Associates. Do you know who they are? They eat people like you for breakfast. Arthur Pendergast is personally handling my file because he owes me a favor. You are powerless, Maya. You are a nobody. Sign the papers, take the cash, and go back to serving coffee." He turned on his heel and walked out. He didn't look back. He didn't see Maya's hand tremble not from fear, but from a sudden, sharp intake of breath. He didn't see her pick up the envelope. He certainly didn't see the look in old Stan's eyes as the cook watched Maya from the kitchen window. Stan walked out, wiping his hands on a towel. "That the husband," Stan grunted. "Ex-husband," Maya corrected, staring at the door. "He hired Pendergast?" Stan asked, raising a bushy white eyebrow. "Yeah," Maya whispered. A strange, bitter smile touched her lips. "He hired Pendergast." Stan let out a low whistle. "Does he know?" "No," Maya said, ripping the envelope open and staring at the insulting settlement offer. "He doesn't have a clue." Maya finished her shift. She poured coffee for the regulars, smiled at the truckers, and cleaned up a spilled milkshake. But her mind was miles away. Derek thought she was powerless because she had walked away from her life 5 years ago. He thought she was just a waitress because that's what she chose to be. When they met, she had told him she was estranged from her family, that she came from nothing. It was a lie she told to protect herself from people who only wanted her for her last name. She wanted to be loved for who she was, not what she was worth. She had fallen in love with Derek because he seemed hungry and passionate. She had poured her secret trust fund money he never knew existed into their groceries and rent so he could invest every penny into his startup. She had ghostwritten his business plan, and the moment he made his first million, he started treating her like an accessory he had outgrown. At 5:00 p.m., Maya clocked out. She walked to her battered 2014 Toyota Camry. She sat in the driver's seat and pulled out her phone. It was an old model with a cracked screen. She scrolled past her landlord's number, past the electric company, until she found a contact she hadn't dialed in 5 years. The name on the screen simply read, "The Wolf." Her thumb hovered over the call button. Derek wanted a war. He wanted to bring Arthur Pendergast into this. She pressed call. It rang once, twice. Then a deep, gravelly voice answered. "Hello, Maya. It's been a long time." "Hello, Silas," Maya said, her voice hardening. "I need a suit, and I need you to book a meeting." "With whom?" "With the opposing counsel on my divorce," she said. "I need a meeting with Arthur Pendergast, tomorrow morning." The offices of Pendergast, Stone and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of the Willis Tower. It was a fortress of glass, steel, and intimidation. The lobby alone cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Derek Sterling sat in the plush leather chair of the executive conference room, feeling like a king. The view behind him was a sprawling panorama of Chicago, but he was more interested in the reflection of himself in the glass table. "It's a slam dunk, Derek," Arthur Pendergast said. Arthur was a legend in Chicago legal circles. 60 years old, silver-haired with eyes that looked like they had seen everything and forgiven nothing. He was known as the Butcher of State Street. He didn't just win cases, he annihilated the opposition. He charged $1,500 an hour, and he was worth every cent. "She's just a waitress," Derek laughed, sipping the espresso an intern had brought him. "She doesn't even have a lawyer yet. She'll probably show up with a public defender." Arthur nodded, flipping through the file. "We have the forensic accountants ready just in case she claims you're hiding assets, which of course we've structured through the shell companies in the Caymans perfectly. Legally, she can't touch them. But Derek, are you sure she has no resources, no family money?" "Positive," Derek scoffed. "She told me her dad was a mechanic in Ohio who died of liver failure. She has no one. She's been working at a diner for 3 years just to pay her half of the rent since I moved out. She's desperate. That's why I offered the 10 grand. It's like a lottery win for someone like her. Arthur closed the file. Good. We go to the preliminary hearing on Thursday. We present the settlement. If she refuses, we bury her in motions until she runs out of money for bus fare. Standard procedure. Just then, the intercom on the mahogany table buzzed. Mr. Pendergast. The receptionist's voice sounded shaky. I told you, no interruptions, Jessica. Arthur snapped. I know, sir, but there's a woman here to see you. She says it's regarding the Sterling case. Derek rolled his eyes. Oh, God. Did she actually come here? Did Maya come to the office? Arthur sighed. Send her away, Jessica. Tell her to communicate through the court. Sir. Jessica's voice dropped to a whisper. She didn't come through the lobby. She came up the private elevator. The one only the senior partners have keys to. The room went silent. Arthur frowned. That's impossible. Only 3 people have keys to that elevator. Me, Mr. Stone, and... He trailed off. Who is it? Arthur demanded. She didn't give a name, sir. She walked right past security. Mr. Pendergast. She's wearing a tailored white suit. She looks like she owns the place. Before Arthur could respond, the heavy double doors of the conference room swung open. It wasn't the waitress from the diner. The woman who walked in was wearing a cream-colored Alexander McQueen power suit that fit her like a second skin. Her hair, usually messy and tied back, was blown out in sleek, dark waves. She wore no jewelry except for a simple, terrifyingly expensive platinum band on her right thumb. She walked with a stride that ate up the distance between the door and the table. Derek stood up confused. Maya. What the hell is this? Did you spend the settlement money on clothes before you even signed the papers? He laughed, trying to regain control. Arthur, this is her. This is the waitress. Kick her out. But Arthur Pendergast wasn't laughing. Arthur was staring at the woman. He was staring at her face, specifically the arch of her brow and the cold grey colour of her eyes. He slowly stood up from his chair. His face, usually flushed with the confidence of a predator, had gone chalk white. Maya ignored Derek completely. She didn't even look at him. She walked straight to the head of the table, Arthur's seat. Arthur stepped aside. He actually stepped aside. Maya placed a small black briefcase on the table. She looked at Arthur. Hello, Arthur, she said. Her voice was different. The Midwestern accent she had used for 5 years was gone, replaced by the clipped transatlantic drawl of old money. It's been a while. You've let the standard slip on the 40th floor. The receptionist is chewing gum. Ms. Maya, Arthur stammered. The butcher of State Street was stuttering. I didn't know you were in the city. I didn't know. You didn't know I was the waitress you were planning to bury. Maya finished for him. Derek looked between them, his face twisting in confusion and anger. Arthur, what is going on? Why are you talking to her like that? She's a nobody. She's serving eggs at a diner. Shut up, Derek, Arthur hissed, not taking his eyes off Maya. Excuse me, Derek shouted. I am your client. I pay your salary. Maya laughed. It was a soft, terrifying sound. She finally turned to look at Derek. Oh, Derek, she said, looking at him with pity. You don't pay his salary. You pay the firm's fees. And the firm... She tapped her finger on the mahogany table. My grandfather founded this firm, Derek. My name isn't Maya Linley. Linley was my mother's maiden name. She unclasped the briefcase. My name, she said, pulling out a document stamped with a wax seal, is Maya Pendergast Vanderbilt, and Arthur here, he's my father's junior partner. Technically, I'm his boss. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Derek's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at Arthur, desperate for a denial. Arthur looked at the floor. Derek, I think you should sit down. I don't understand, Derek whispered, sinking into his chair. You're a waitress. We lived in a studio apartment. We ate ramen. I wanted to see if you could build something on your own, Maya said, leaning against the table. I wanted to see if you loved me or the access I could give you. And for a while you passed the test. But then came the money. And then came Chloe. And then came the cruelty. She walked over to Derek, looming over him. You called me powerless, she said softly. You said I was nothing without you. But here's the reality, Derek. Sterling Tech. The venture capital firm that gave you your seed funding, Vanguard Holdings. Derek nodded slowly, pale as a sheet. Yes, they were our first investors. I own Vanguard Holdings, Maya said. I approved your funding because I believed in my husband, and that ironclad prenup you made me sign to protect your assets. She looked at Arthur. Arthur, did you draft that prenup for him? I had an associate do it, Arthur mumbled, wiping sweat from his forehead. Well, Maya smiled. Since you represent me via the family trust, and you represented him in the prenup, there is a massive conflict of interest here, Arthur, which means the prenup is void, which means, she looked back at Derek, which means half of your company is mine. And since I own the VC firm that owns the other 40%, she leaned down, her face inches from his. I don't just want a divorce, Derek. I'm taking the company. I'm taking the house. I'm taking the dog. And I'm firing your lawyer. She stood up straight and pointed at the door. Get out of my office. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind Derek, leaving a silence in the conference room that felt thick enough to choke on. The air conditioning hummed a low, indifferent sound against the sudden collapse of Arthur Pendergast's career. Arthur didn't sit. He couldn't. He stood by the window, his back to Maya, staring out at the grey Chicago skyline. His hands, usually steady as they signed foreclosure notices and hostile takeover bids, were trembling violently. Maya didn't move from the head of the table. She sat with a posture that had been drilled into her since boarding school in Switzerland, spine steel straight, chin raised, eyes unblinking. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a silver cigarette case. She didn't smoke, but she knew Arthur hated the smell. She lit one just to watch him flinch. You have 30 seconds to explain why you shouldn't be disbarred by lunchtime, Arthur, Maya said. Her voice was low, lacking the anger of a scorned wife. It was worse. It was the indifference of an executioner. Arthur turned slowly. He looked 20 years older than he had 10 minutes ago. Maya, Ms. Vanderbilt, I swear to you I didn't know. When you left the family 5 years ago, when you disappeared, your father told us you were in Europe. He said you were on a sabbatical. We stopped looking. You stopped looking because it was convenient, Maya corrected, watching the smoke curl toward the ceiling. And when my ex-husband walked into this firm, did you not run a background check on his spouse? Did the great Arthur Pendergast get lazy? I ran it, Arthur pleaded, walking back to the table, his hands gripping the leather chair. It came back as Maya Linley, Ohio State Records, birth certificate, Social Security. It was airtight. Of course it was airtight. A deep, gravelly voice rumbled from the corner of the room. Arthur jumped, spinning around. He hadn't heard the service door open. Standing in the shadows of the room was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. He was older, perhaps in his late 50s, wearing a black trench coat that had seen better days. His face was a map of scars and hard living, but his eyes were sharp, intelligent, and fiercely protective. "Silas," Arthur whispered, the colour draining from his face again. "I thought you were retired." "I am," Silas grunted, stepping into the light. He walked over to Maya and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. It was the touch of a father figure, not a servant. But Miss Maya called, and when she calls, the wolf answers. Silas looked at Arthur with pure contempt. "I forged those documents, Arthur. I created the legend of Maya Linley. I planted the records in Ohio. I paid the actors who pretended to be her distant cousins at the wedding. If you couldn't spot my handiwork, you're losing your touch." Maya extinguished the unsmoked cigarette. "Silas has been my eyes and ears, Arthur. He's been watching Derek for years. He watched him cheat. He watched him steal intellectual property from his competitors. And he watched him hire you to bully me into poverty." Arthur slumped into the chair. "What do you want, Maya? I'll recuse myself. I'll drop the case. I'll refund his retainer." "Oh, you'll do much more than that," Maya said, standing up. She walked over to the window, looking down at the street, where she could just make out Derek's figure storming toward his car. "You aren't going to drop the case, Arthur," she said softly. "You are going to represent him. You are going to be the worst, most incompetent lawyer in the history of Illinois. You are going to advise him to make mistakes. You are going to let him dig his own grave." Arthur stared at her, horrified. "You want me to sabotage my own client? That's malpractice. That's illegal." Maya turned her eyes cold. "And drafting a prenup for a husband, while secretly representing the wife's trust fund, is a conflict of interest that would send you to prison for fraud, Arthur. We have the emails where you discussed hiding Derek's assets in the Caymans. Silas hacked your server 3 days ago." Silas dropped a USB drive onto the table. It clattered loudly. "Your choice, Arthur," Silas growled. "Play the game by Maya's rules, or I hand this drive to the Bar Association and the FBI within the hour." Arthur looked at the drive, then at Maya. He swallowed hard, a dry, painful gulp. He knew he was trapped. The Vanderbilt family didn't make threats. They made promises. What is the first move?" Arthur asked, his voice defeated. Maya smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Derek is going to try to fight dirty," she said. "He's panic-stricken. He's going to look for leverage. Let him think he found some. And then bring him to the gala on Friday." "The Sterling Tech Charity Gala?" Arthur asked. "But you're a waitress to them. You can't just show up." "I won't be showing up as a waitress," Maya said, picking up her briefcase. "It's time Chicago met the real owner of Sterling Tech. I want him to feel safe, Arthur. I want him to think he has a plan. And then in front of the cameras, in front of the investors, in front of Chloe, I'm going to take the crown off his head." She walked to the door, Silas trailing behind her like a dark shadow. She paused with her hand on the brass handle. "Don't disappoint me, Arthur. My father was fond of you. I am not." Derek Sterling sat in his Porsche Cayenne, his hands gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. He was hyperventilating. The world was tilting on its axis. Maya Pendergast Vanderbilt. It didn't make sense. It couldn't be true. He replayed the last 5 years in his head. The nights she clipped coupons for groceries. The way she cried when the transmission on her old Honda broke because they couldn't afford to fix it. The way she scrubbed the floor of their first apartment on her hands and knees. "She's a psycho," he whispered to the empty car. "She's sick. Who does that? Who hides millions of dollars and watches their husband struggle?" He felt a surge of righteous indignation. He convinced himself that he was the victim here. She had lied to him. That had to be grounds for something right. Fraud entrapment. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was Chloe. "Babe," her voice was high and whining. "Where are you?" "We have a lunch reservation at Nobu. You promised you'd buy me that bracelet today." "Not now, Chloe," Derek snapped, shouting at the dashboard. There was a pause on the line. "Whoa, chill out. Did you sign the papers with the waitress?" "Is she gone?" It's complicated," Derek stammered. "I'm coming to pick you up, but we aren't going to Nobu. We're going to see a guy." "A guy?" "What guy?" "A fixer," Derek said darkly, putting the car in gear. "If Arthur won't help me, I need someone who isn't afraid to get their hands dirty." "40 minutes later, the Porsche was parked in a neighborhood Derek wouldn't usually be caught dead in. South Chicago. The sign above the door read, "Gavin Roach, Attorney at Law, Personal Injury and Divorce." The L in law was flickering. Derek and a reluctant, pouting Chloe walked into the office. It smelled of stale cigar smoke and cheap cologne. Behind a desk piled high with disorganized files sat Gavin Roach. He was a small, weasel-like man with slicked-back hair and a stain on his tie. He was the opposite of Arthur Pendergast. He was cheap, he was nasty, and he hated the elite firms. "Mr. Sterling," Gavin said, leaning back and putting his feet on the desk. He grinned, revealing yellowed teeth. "I saw you on the cover of Forbes last month. What is a big fish like you doing in my pond? Shouldn't you be at the Willis Tower?" "I was," Derek said, sitting on the edge of a plastic chair. "But they are compromised." Derek spent 20 minutes explaining the situation. He told Gavin about Maya's revelation. He told him about the money, the name, the power. When he finished, Gavin wasn't scared. He was laughing. He laughed until he started coughing. "You married a Vanderbilt, and you didn't know," Gavin wheezed. "Kid, you are the dumbest genius I've ever met." "I don't need your commentary," Derek spat. "I need a strategy. She wants everything. She says she owns the VC firm that funded me. She says the prenup is void." Gavin stopped laughing. His eyes narrowed into slits. "If she is who she says she is, you can't beat her with money. You can't outspend a Vanderbilt. They have money that's older than this city." "So I lose?" Derek asked, his voice breaking. "No," Gavin said, leaning forward. "You don't fight them with money. You fight them with mud." Gavin pulled a yellow legal pad toward him and started scribbling furiously. "Here is the narrative," Gavin said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "She didn't hide her identity to be romantic. She hid it because she is mentally unstable. We paint her as paranoid, delusional. We claim she created a false identity to entrap you." "Entrap me, how?" "To steal your ideas," Gavin said. "You said she wrote the original code, right?" Derek hesitated. "Yeah, in the basement. I mean, I gave her the broad strokes, but she typed it out." "Wrong." Gavin slammed his hand on the desk. "You wrote it. She was just the typist. But now she's using her family's massive influence to steal your company. We spin this as a hostile takeover by a bored, rich heiress crushing a self-made man. Derek's eyes lit up. It was a lie, but it was a beautiful lie. It played into every insecurity he had. It made him the hero. "The media," Derek said. "We go to the press." "Exactly." Gavin nodded. "But not yet. We need to ambush her. When is the next big public event for Sterling Tech?" "Friday," Derek said. "The annual charity gala. All the investors will be there. The press, the mayor." "Perfect," Gavin grinned. "She's planning to come out as the owner, right? That's her big moment. We strike first. We file an emergency injunction on Friday morning, claiming she committed spousal fraud. Then at the gala, when she tries to step up, you have security escort her out as a corporate spy." Chloe, who had been scrolling on TikTok, looked up. "Wait, can I still go to the gala? I bought a dress." "Yes, you're going," Gavin said, pointing a pen at her. "And you're going to look like the supportive, victimized fiancé. We need tears, sweetheart." "Can you do tears?" Chloe rolled her eyes. "For the right price, I can do a flood." "Good," Gavin said. He looked at Derek. "It's going to cost you sterling. My fee is 10% of whatever we save." "Done," Derek said without hesitation. He stood up, feeling a renewed sense of power. He wasn't powerless. He was Derek Sterling, CEO. He wasn't going to let a waitress take his empire. Meanwhile, across the city, the atmosphere was very different. Maya was not in a boardroom. She was in a small, modest house in the suburbs, the house she had bought under the name Maya Linley before she met Derek. It was the only place that felt real. She sat on the floor of the living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes. She was holding a framed photograph. It was a picture of her and Derek from 4 years ago. They were eating pizza on a park bench. Derek had sauce on his chin. Maya was laughing, her head thrown back, her eyes shining with adoration. She traced Derek's face in the photo with her thumb. "Why wasn't I enough?" she whispered to the empty room. "Just me without the name, without the money." A tear slid down her cheek, hot and fast. This wasn't just a game of chess. This was her heart breaking in slow motion. She had truly loved him. She had believed that he was the one person who saw her, not the Vanderbilt fortune. The back door opened with a creak. Silas walked in, carrying 2 paper bags of Chinese takeout. He saw her on the floor, saw the photo, and his expression softened. He set the food down on the coffee table and sat on the sofa near her. He didn't speak for a long time. He just let her cry. "He doesn't deserve the tears, little wolf," Silas said finally. "I know." Maya wiped her face, her voice thick. "But I'm not crying for him, Silas. I'm crying for the girl in the picture. She was happy. She was hopeful. And I have to kill her to survive this." Silas leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "You aren't killing her. You're defending her. Derek didn't fall out of love with you, Maya. He fell in love with himself, and he sacrificed you to that altar." Silas reached into his pocket and pulled out a buzzing phone. He looked at the screen and frowned. "It started," Silas said, his voice turning grim. "What has—" "My contacts at the courthouse," Silas said. "A low-rent lawyer named Gavin Roach just filed an emergency motion. They're claiming fraudulent misrepresentation and corporate espionage. They are trying to get a restraining order to keep you away from Sterling Tech." Maya stood up. The sadness evaporated from her face, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She threw the photo into the trash bin. The glass shattered. "He wants to play the victim," Maya said, her voice steady. "He wants to paint me as the villain." "He's going to try to humiliate you at the gala," Silas warned. "If you walk in there, he'll have security waiting. It could be a scene." Maya walked to the window, looking at her reflection. She didn't see the waitress anymore. She saw the heiress. She saw the power she had run from for so long. "Let him try," Maya said. "Get the car ready, Silas, and call the tailor. I need a dress, not something nice. I need something that looks like armor." "Red?" Silas asked, a small smile touching his lips. "Blood red," Maya confirmed. "If he wants a villain, I'll give him the best one he's ever seen." Friday evening descended upon Chicago like a heavy velvet curtain. The grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hilton was a galaxy of crystal chandeliers, gold leaf, and the glittering elite of the tech world. This was the night of the Sterling Tech Annual Gala, the night Derek Sterling was set to announce his company's impending IPO, a move that would make him a billionaire on paper. Derek stood near the entrance, a glass of vintage champagne in his hand. He looked impeccable in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, his hair styled to perfection. Beside him, Chloe was draped in a silver sequined gown that left little to the imagination. She was busy checking her reflection in her phone's camera, ensuring her followers knew she was at the event of the year. "Stop fidgeting," Derek hissed under his breath, smiling tightly at a passing investor. "You look fine. Just stand there and look supportive." "I'm bored," Chloe complained, snapping her gum. "When do we get to the part where you kick your ex-wife out? Soon." Derek promised, his eyes scanning the room. He spotted Gavin Roach standing by the buffet table, looking out of place in an ill-fitting rental suit, stuffing shrimp into his pockets. Gavin caught Derek's eye and gave a subtle thumbs up. The trap was set. Derek felt a surge of adrenaline. He had convinced himself that the lie was the truth. Maya was crazy. She was jealous. She was trying to sabotage his genius. Tonight he wouldn't just divorce her. He would destroy her credibility. Forever. In the corner, Arthur Pendergast stood alone, nursing a scotch. He looked pale and ill. He had tried to warn Derek one last time earlier that afternoon, but Derek had laughed in his face, calling him a coward. Arthur watched the doors with a sense of impending doom. He knew what was coming. He knew who was coming. 5 miles away, the atmosphere was starkly different. Maya stood before a full-length mirror in the master bedroom of the safe house. The woman reflected back was a stranger. She was wearing the dress. It was a custom Valentino, structured and architectural in a shade of red, so deep it looked like fresh arterial blood. It was strapless, exposing the delicate line of her collarbone with a slit that ran up her thigh. It was aggressive. It was unapologetic. Silas stepped into the room. He was wearing a tuxedo, and for the first time in years, he didn't look like a roughneck from the streets. He looked like the head of security for one of the most powerful families in America. "The car is ready, Miss Maya," Silas said softly. Maya didn't turn. She stared at her own eyes in the mirror. "Do I look like a waitress, Silas?" "No," Silas replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You look like your grandmother. She wore red the day she hostile took over the steel mills in '74. He walked over to her, holding a small velvet box. "Your father wanted you to have this," Silas said, opening it. Inside sat a necklace. It wasn't subtle. It was the Vanderbilt star, a sapphire the size of a pigeon's egg, surrounded by flawless diamonds. It was a piece of jewelry that belonged in a museum or on the neck of a queen. It was worth more than Sterling Tech's entire annual revenue. Maya touched the cold stone. Putting it on felt like fastening a collar of responsibility around her neck. She had run from this life to find something real, and now, to save herself, she had to embrace the very thing she hated. "Clasp it for me, please," she whispered. Silas fastened the heavy necklace. The sapphire rested against her skin, a heavy, cold weight. "Derek isn't just going to lose his company tonight," Silas said, stepping back. "He's going to lose his reality. He chose this," Maya said, her voice hardening. She picked up a clutch purse that contained only one thing, a USB drive with the original source code of the algorithm. "Let's go," she said. "I don't want to be late for my own party." The drive to the hotel was silent. Maya watched the city blur past the tinted windows of the 1965 Rolls-Royce Phantom, a car that had been in her family's garage for decades. It was a statement vehicle. It screamed old money. As they pulled up to the Palmer house, the paparazzi were already in a frenzy. Flashbulbs popped like lightning storms. When the Rolls-Royce stopped, the crowd hushed. They were expecting tech bros in Teslas, not American royalty in a Phantom. Silas got out first. The cameras clicked furiously as the scarred, imposing man opened the rear door. First, a red-soled stiletto hit the pavement. Then Maya emerged. The silence that rippled through the press line was palpable. They didn't know who she was, yet to them, she was a mystery woman. But they knew money when they saw it. The dress, the bearing, the sapphire. "Who is she?" a photographer whispered. "I don't know," another replied, zooming in on the necklace. "But that rock that's real." Maya didn't smile. She didn't wave. She walked up the red carpet with a terrifying grace, Silas a step behind her. The security at the door, hired by Derek's team to stop Maya Linley, the waitress, froze. The guard looked at the list. He looked at the woman in the blood-red gown. He looked at the sapphire. "Ticket," the guard stammered. Maya stopped. She lowered her sunglasses, revealing eyes of steel grey. "I don't need a ticket," she said, her voice low and smooth. "I'm the reason the lights are on." She didn't wait for permission. She walked past him, and for the first time in her life, Maya didn't feel like an imposter. She felt like the storm. Inside the ballroom, Derek was on stage. He was 5 minutes into his speech, and he was soaring. Sterling Tech wasn't built on money. Derek lied into the microphone, his voice booming over the speakers. It was built on grit, on long nights in a basement. It was built on the idea that one man with enough passion can change the world. The crowd applauded politely. Derek beamed. He gestured to the large screen behind him, which displayed a complex graphic of the Sterling algorithm. "There were those who doubted me." Derek continued his tone, shifting to one of practiced vulnerability. "There were those who couldn't keep up with the vision. Sadly, sometimes we outgrow people. Sometimes people we love become anchors holding us back." He looked toward the back of the room, anticipating the drama. He had signaled the security team. As soon as Maya showed up in her waitress uniform, or whatever rag she bought at Goodwill, they were to grab her. "But we press on," Derek shouted, "because the future belongs to the strong." The double doors at the back of the ballroom didn't just open. They were thrown ward. The sound of the heavy oak slamming against the wall echoed like a gunshot. The applause died instantly. Every head in the room turned. Derek squinted against the stage lights. He saw a figure in red. For a second, he didn't recognize her. He thought it was a celebrity, a model hired for the event. But then she stepped into the light of the chandelier. It was Maya. But it wasn't his Maya. This wasn't the woman who wore oversized t-shirts and scraped leftovers into the trash. This was a deity. The red dress flowed around her like liquid fire. The sapphire at her throat caught the light and scattered blue fractures across the room. The room gasped, a collective audible intake of breath. Derek's microphone picked up his confused whisper. "Maya." Gavin Roach, standing near the stage, panicked. This wasn't the script. She was supposed to look crazy. She looked like she owned the building. "Security!" Gavin yelled, pointing a shaking finger. "That's her! The stalker, get her out!" 3 large security guards started moving toward Maya. The crowd murmured, sensing the tension. This was better than the IPO presentation. Maya didn't flinch. She didn't stop walking. She moved down the center aisle, the crowd parting for her, like the Red Sea. As the lead guard reached for her arm, Silas stepped out from behind her. He didn't strike the man. He simply held up a hand. "Touch her." Silas growled low enough for only the guards to hear, but with enough menace to freeze blood. "And you will never work in this hemisphere again." The guard hesitated. He looked at Maya. He looked at the necklace. He recognized the look of absolute authority. He lowered his hand and stepped back. Maya walked past the security team as if they were furniture. She reached the base of the stage. Derek was frozen at the podium, his face a mask of terror and confusion. Chloe, standing to the side, looked at her own silver dress and suddenly felt like she was wearing tinfoil. "You—" Derek stammered into the mic. "You can't be here. You're trespassing." Maya didn't yell. She didn't need a microphone. The room was so silent you could hear the ice melting in the buckets. She walked up the stairs to the stage. The click of her heels was the only sound. She stood next to Derek. She was shorter than him, but she loomed over him. She reached out and, with a gentle, almost maternal motion, adjusted his crooked bow tie. "I'm not trespassing, Derek," she said. Her voice was amplified by his lapel mic, broadcasting her calm, cultured tone to the entresue room. "You can't trespass in a house you paid for." "Security!" Derek screamed, his voice cracking. "Get this waitress off the stage. She's mentally unstable." Maya laughed. It was a soft, dry chuckle. She turned to the audience. "Waitress," she repeated. "Yes, I did serve tables for 3 years because my husband put every penny we had into this company." She turned back to Derek. "But you forgot where the seed money came from." "Didn't you, Derek? You forgot who signed the check for the initial server farm." "I got that from Vanguard Holdings," Derek shouted, sweating profusely. "I pitched to them. They invested in me." "And who is the primary shareholder of Vanguard Holdings?" Maya asked. She looked out at the front row, where the board of directors sat. "Mr. Henderson, would you mind clarifying for the room?" Mr. Henderson, the chairman of the board, stood up slowly. He looked at Derek with pity. "The primary shareholder of Vanguard Holdings," Henderson said, his voice grave, "is the Pendergast Vanderbilt Trust. The beneficiary is Maya Pendergast Vanderbilt." Derek felt his knees buckle. He gripped the podium to keep from falling. "Vanderbilt?" he whispered. "No. No, you're Maya Linley. Your dad was a mechanic." "I lied," Maya said simply. "I wanted to be sure you loved me. I wanted a life without the weight of my name. And for a while, I thought we had it." She stepped closer to the microphone. "But then you got greedy, Derek. You didn't just want success. You wanted to erase me. You wanted to discard me with $10,000 and a gag order. She reached into her purse and pulled out the USB drive. She held it up. You told this room you wrote the code, Maya said. You told the world you are the visionary behind the Sterling algorithm. I am, Derek shrieked, desperate to salvage his image. It's my code. Really? Maya smiled. Then tell me, Derek, what happens on line 4032 of the kernel? Derek stared at her. What? The code, Maya said. If you wrote it, you know the architecture. On line 4032 there is a signature, a developer's tag. What does it say? Derek opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He didn't know. He had never looked at the deep code. He only knew the interface. I'll tell you what it says, Maya said. It says, for D, love M, the crowd murmured. And, Maya continued, her voice turning hard, it also contains a kill switch, a command that I wrote in case the system was ever stolen or compromised. She turned to the laptop connected to the massive screen. Don't! Derek lunged for her. Silas was there in a blur. He caught Derek by the wrist, twisting it behind his back with effortless precision. Derek yelped in pain, forced to his knees in front of the entire Chicago elite. Maya plugged the USB drive into the laptop. Since you claimed I am a corporate spy, Maya said, typing a command. I suppose I should prove you right. I am taking my intellectual property back. She hit enter. On the massive screen behind them, the complex graphics of the Sterling algorithm flickered. Red lines of code began to scroll rapidly. Then the screen went black. A moment later, a single image appeared on the giant screen. It was the photo of them eating pizza on the park bench, the one she had thrown away. Then text appeared under it. System locked. Copyright returned to author. Phones started buzzing all over the room. The investors were checking the app. It's down, someone shouted. The whole platform is down. The stock is plummeting in the after-hours market. Maya pulled the USB drive out. She looked down at Derek, who was kneeling on the floor, held by Silas, sobbing. You called me powerless, Maya said, her voice echoing in the silent ballroom. She leaned down, her lips brushing his ear. Power isn't about how loud you shout, Derek. It's about who holds the keys. You built a castle on my land with my bricks using my design. And now I'm evicting you. She stood up and looked at Chloe. You can keep him, Maya said to the terrified girl. And you can keep the Porsche. It's in his name, and he's going to need to sell it to pay his legal fees. Maya turned to the crowd. Enjoy the champagne, she said. I paid for it. She turned on her heel and walked off the stage, the red dress trailing behind her, like the blood of a slain dragon. Arthur Pendergast, watching from the corner, finished his scotch in one gulp. He set the glass down and walked toward the exit. He knew his career was over, but God, that was a hell of a show. 3 months later, the snow was falling softly on the streets of Chicago, covering the grime of the city in a clean white blanket. In a small, drafty apartment in the outskirts of the city, Derek Sterling sat on a folding chair. The bespoke suits were gone, sold to pay for a legal defense that ultimately failed. The Porsche was repossessed. Chloe had left him exactly 48 hours after the gala, right around the time his credit cards were declined at the hotel checkout. Derek stared at the small television set in the corner. It was tuned to a business news channel. The headline read, Vanderbilt Trust rebrands Sterling Tech as Phoenix Systems, shares soar. On the screen, Maya was cutting a ribbon. She wasn't wearing the red dress or the jewels. She was wearing a simple professional blazer. She looked happy. She looked free. The reporter noted that the company's new mission statement focused on ethical tech and fair wages, a complete pivot from Derek's profit at all costs model. Derek turned off the TV. The silence in the room was deafening. He looked at the packet of instant noodles on the counter. It was the same brand he and Maya used to eat when they were first dating. Back then it tasted like an adventure. Now it tasted like regret. He realized far too late that the richest he had ever been was when he had nothing but her. Miles away at the Blue Jay Diner, the lunch rush was just ending. The bell above the door jingled. Old Stan, the cook, didn't look up from the grill. "Sit anywhere, I'll be with you in a minute." "I'll take table 4, Stan, and keep the coffee coming." Stan froze. He dropped his spatula. He turned slowly, his eyes widening. Maya was sitting at her old table. She smiled at him, a genuine warm smile that reached her eyes. "Maya." Stan wiped his hands on his apron and hurried over. "I saw you on the news. Everyone saw you, I thought. I thought you were gone for good. You're a Vanderbilt. You own half the city." "I own a few things, Stan," Maya said softly. "But I haven't forgotten where my friends are." She slid a thick envelope across the sticky table. It looked just like the one Derek had thrown there months ago, but the energy was entirely different. "What's this?" Stan asked, his hands shaking. "Open it." Stan opened the envelope. Inside were the property deeds to the building. The Blue Jay Diner occupied, along with a check large enough to renovate the entire kitchen and retire comfortably whenever he chose. "I bought the building this morning, Stan," Maya said, taking a sip of the coffee he poured. "You don't pay rent anymore. You're the landlord." Stan started to cry, big silent tears running into his white beard. "Why, I'm just a cook." "You were the only one who asked if I was okay when he walked out," Maya said. "You saw the person, not the waitress." She stood up and buttoned her coat. Outside, the Rolls-Royce was waiting with Silas standing by the door. "Keep the coffee hot, Stan," she said, walking toward the door. "I might stop by for a shift now and then, just to keep myself grounded." Maya walked out into the snow, the cold air biting her cheeks. She looked at the city skyline, then at the car where Silas was waiting to take her to her next meeting. She wasn't powerless. She never had been. She had just needed to remember that her worth didn't come from a man's approval, a bank account, or a name. It came from the strength to walk away when the check was paid. She got into the car, and for the first time in 5 years, she didn't look back. And that is the story of Maya and Derek. It serves as a brutal reminder that you should never judge someone by their uniform, their job title, or their current circumstances. Derek made the fatal mistake of confusing kindness with weakness. He thought that because Maya served him food, she was beneath him. He was blinded by arrogance, chasing the validation of status, while he had a woman of immense power and loyalty sleeping right beside him. In the end, the tables didn't just turn, they flipped completely. Derek lost his empire because he forgot the most basic rule of business and life: treat people with respect. You never know who is sitting across the table from you. You never know if the person you are trying to crush is actually the one holding the keys to your entire life. Maya proved that true power isn't about shouting the loudest. It's about knowing exactly when to drop the hammer. Wow, what a journey. I hope you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption. I want to know what you think. If you were in Maya's shoes, would you have destroyed Derek's company like she did? Or would you have just walked away quietly? Let me know your answer in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. We have plenty more dramatic tales of revenge and justice coming your way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.